Let me get my hat on. Can't do this vlog without a hat on. Hey everyone, so I came up with an idea to do a quick vlog style video today because I'm working on an edit right now for a film that I started recording quite a while ago, and I just haven't had a chance to get it fully finished up. So I'm gonna go for a quick spin over to the cafe in Duncan's Mills, California, and talk a bit about my thoughts on whether or not it's possible or even practicable to create a one-size-fits-all, do-it-all bike. So we're gonna head out for a ride. Hope you join me, and we're gonna head out, so let's get going. So we're gonna go for a quick ride over to the coffee shop, and that got me thinking about which bike is the best bike to choose. But before we check that out, let's look at this waterfall. Yeah, so we're gonna take a ride over to the cafe, but it got me thinking about is there really a one bike does all? So let's explore that a little bit. Oh, it's so nice today. So in an ideal world, you could have one bike that would serve every purpose for you. And it would be fast, it would be light, you could put racks on it, you could put big tires, supple tires, you could put mountain bike tires, off-road tires, you could throw some racks on it, some bags, take it on a touring ride. You could take the big racks off and just put a small rando rack and use it for a randoneering ride. You know, basically a one bike does it all. If you wanted to have a one-size-fits-all bike, then are you going to need to have separate saddles to put on it? So a Brooks saddle is very comfortable, and it's also very heavy. The other thought is, for a touring bike, the steel tends to be a bit thicker because you're going to be carrying a lot heavier load. And a touring bike that's designed properly will be designed around a specific weight of a rider, plus the rider's gear. And it will ride very well once it's at that weight. Whereas a randoneering bike might be undersized and too thin, and once you load it, you're either risking that a crack in the frame at a joint, or the tube may crack, you could break a fork. You will have more sets of wheels, which you would have to have more sets of wheels anyhow, simply because a one-size-fits-all bike there is no wheel set that can accomplish all the possible tasks you want those wheels to do. You might need a carbon wheel set for racing, you might need some durable heavy-duty aluminum wheels for touring, you may need a generator hub for your randoneering and touring rides. For commuting, you may want to have a generator hub for lighting, but you certainly could get away with battery-powered lights. So that's the practical side of it. What about the lifestyle side of it? I like riding different bikes, getting a different feel from different materials. I love riding steel, I love riding carbon, I love riding titanium. I love experimenting with different bike frame materials and getting a different experience from each one of them. So I'm gonna take you with me to Gold Coast Coffee in Duncan's Mills, California. I need to stop at the store across the street. So the one downside with Gold Coast Coffee is, even though they have a lot of baked goods, Most of them have butter or eggs or something like that in them. So that's the Gold Coast Coffee. We're gonna go over there. But first we're gonna stop in here at the general store. Get a few supplies today, something to eat. Not a bad day. There's the rodeo there, and there's a cafe across the street. Kind of see the remnants of the train. Sure. Basically a train depot, and they would turn the trains and they would actually head up into the town of Cazadero, which was the final stop on the North Pacific Railroad from the Bay Area. So back at the day, you could take the train from San Francisco all the way up to Cazadero and spend a month or a summer up here. That was real popular back then. The logging operations moved into the area to start harvesting redwood trees around the late 1800s and got really going back in the early part of the 1900s, just after the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco that literally leveled the city. Most of the buildings were reconstructed from timber from this area up here in Sonoma County. Most of the train tracks have been taken out. There's still remnants of the trains left over. Some of the bridges are still in place, but a lot of the tracks have been removed. I think it would be worth discussing, if you do want a one-size-fits-all bike, what would I do if I were, say, living in a small apartment and I really could only have one bike and I needed something that could kind of do a little bit of everything. So let me tell you what I would do, and you could modify this how you see fit, what would work better for your situation. But if I were in a situation where I could only have one bike, I think what I would do is I would start with a fully custom built frame. And the reason I would say that is because I can't think of something that would be off the shelf that would work for me personally to cover my needs. So I would start with custom, and I would either make it out of steel, which is probably the choice I'd make, but the other alternative might be titanium. Both of those materials are highly customizable, and they also are very durable materials, and they will last a long time. Also, you're more able to adapt racks and fenders to steel or titanium bikes. The reason I'm excluding carbon and aluminum right now is because for a one-size-fits-all bike, carbon would be my last choice. It is light and it is strong, but it is not durable, and it is not very impact resistant, and it is not easily modified later if you decide you need to put a rack or a braze on, or change a water bottle configuration, or do some sort of repair work. It's a lot more difficult to do that on a carbon bike. Aluminum I skip because aluminum is it's a lot harder to weld aluminum, and it tends to be a lot stiffer as a result, because to weld aluminum you need a very thick wall section, meaning it's going to be a lot thicker than it would need to be to carry just the load, but it has to be thick so that it can be welded properly and have a strong joint. So aluminum frames tend to be a lot stronger and stiffer, and thus more uncomfortable for a bike that would be designed to do everything. I do have an aluminum mountain bike frame, and I like it a lot, but it is very specific for mountain biking only. I don't think I wouldn't prefer that for a road bike or touring bike, a cross bike. I would rather have aluminum or titanium or steel. Now, as far as ride quality goes, steel and titanium are both equally good. They are different. They feel different on the road. They respond differently. Titanium has more of a springiness to it that steel doesn't necessarily have, but it's super durable, and it is also weldable. It is a bit more expensive to build a titanium frame, but if you want something that's going to last a long time, probably the rest of your life, I would say titanium is a good choice. But that might be a decision you need to make. If you don't plan to keep the bike forever, titanium might not be worth the extra dollars that it will take to get one. Okay, so now let's talk quickly about how I would set it up. So it needs to be able to have rack mounts, fender mounts, and it needs to have clearance for various size tires. You're not going to want a bike that's limited to road tires only if you're trying to build an all-around bike. So I would say make sure the frame has generous clearances for larger tires, and I would probably say a tire up to possibly a 2¼ inch knobby tire. So that would give you option for mountain bike riding. I'm gonna say, in the case of having one size fits all, you're gonna need several forks, not just one. Okay, so how many forks are you gonna need to have? That's a real personal decision you'll need to make. My thinking is, just without actually doing this, I'm gonna say you're gonna need at least 2, but even possibly 3 different forks. So let me define the forks that I would start off with. The first one would be obviously a performance-oriented fork for mountain bike riding and cyclocross riding, gravel riding, and even road riding. The other fork I would recommend would be something on the opposite end of that spectrum, which would be more of a touring fork, something that can carry loads, it can have racks mounted to it, especially having a handlebar bag rack and lowrider pannier racks. I would go with a low trail geometry so that it handles the load well when the fork is on and the bike is loaded up. So those would be the 2 probably basic configurations. Now you could split up the off-road performance and the on-road performance into 2 forks. I think that would be better, but again, if it's a matter of keeping it simple, then you're gonna have to somehow combine the 2, and that's okay, because in a lot of ways the movement towards bigger road tires will be, that trend is gonna continue for a while now. You could have 3 forks, so you could have large clearance performance fork that would be good for off-road riding, dirt, trails, single track mountain bike style riding, and gravel riding, and then a fork with a little less clearance but a little lighter weight and a little softer. It'll absorb road vibrations better, and you can run thinner, lighter road tires. So that would cover you for those road rides. So I would say 3 forks for me. Definitely one that's geared around touring, randoneering with racks and the option to carry lowrider panniers. And fenders, and I'd have the fender mounted to the fork at all times. So it would be the moment you pull the fork off, put it on, you have a fender. Let's get into saddles. I'd have something for like a long distance touring ride saddle. I'd have that on a seat post, marked with the height of the saddle set to your individual geometry. Ready to go. They need to be set up individually and marked so that you can quickly take them on and off. You're gonna need several sets of wheels because you're gonna want them set up with tires all ready to go. That brings me to brakes. What brakes would I use? This is a hard one. This is probably the hardest decision. I do like disc brakes for a few reasons, and I do like rim brakes for a few reasons. Is it possible to have both? You can, but it's going to be really complicated to switch them around, especially if one set of wheels is disc and the other set is rim. So you kind of need to make a choice now. I am still more of an old school, if you will. I like rim brakes a lot. They're not as powerful, they do not stop you as well, and they don't work as well in wet conditions. But they are super cheap to maintain, super simple to adjust, and the pads are cheap to replace. And the way they work, the way they are adjusted is very simple compared to disc brakes. Now disc brakes are getting better. I have found a couple of positive improvements on the Shimano XT disc brakes I recently put on my mountain bike. I do like them better. They're a little easier to adjust and maintain. They still squeal a little bit, and I don't care for that. Plus they're hydraulic, so you do have a hydraulic fluid line that will eventually need maintenance, which is a little bit more complicated and possibly a little more costly than a cable brake that's just a cheap cable, but still not too bad. So I'm on the fence here. I could go either way. But I would think, for me personally, if this bike were to be doing, let's put it this way, if this bike were going to be doing more gravel and off-road riding than it is on the road, I would go with disc brakes. If this is going to be more of a road and touring bike, but then an occasional dirt, I would go with rim brakes. So that's up to you. Okay, so to conclude this discussion, I would say that it is possible to have a one bike does it all. There's a few advantages and there's a few downsides. With bicycling, there's always going to be some form of a trade-off. If not, I guess we wouldn't have so many different bike companies or bike manufacturers. There just wouldn't be as many people trying to design something that's just a little bit better. But you can have a bike that could serve many purposes very well, maybe not perfectly. It may not do one thing perfectly, but it could do most everything good enough. And so that's where you have to make a decision on what's important to you. I've had enough fun today talking about this, so I'm gonna go and I'm gonna let you go. Have a nice day. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and of course, if you have any comments or suggestions, please post them in the comments section below, and I will see you on the next video.